here. Well, welcome everyone to the Tuesday night lecture. My name is Esther, and I'm the studio coordinator for photography and new media here at Anderson Ranch. We're so glad you're here. Tonight's program will consist of 2 speakers followed by a Q&A, so please hold your questions till the end. Before we begin, we would like to take a moment to ask everyone to silence their cell phones as to not disturb the program. Anderson Ranch would also like to acknowledge that our campus resides on the traditional and ancestral territory of the Ute people, who called the Roaring Fork Valley and beyond home for over 800 years. First, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Henri Broyard. Henri Broyard makes paintings that examine perceptions of interior domestic spaces and the rich histories contained in the places we inhabit. His work is informed by a combination of his own images, collected photos, and personal memories from his upbringing in South Central Los Angeles and daily encounters with urban marks in New York. Broyard received a B.F.A. in drawing and painting from the California College of the Arts in 2013. He attended the class Peter Doig in Dusseldorf in 2014. His work has shown in exhibitions at galleries including the Grant Wahlquist Gallery in Portland, Maine, Alexander Gray Gallery in New York, in Germantown, Essex Flowers in New York, SOLA Gallery in Los Angeles, and the School of Painting in Hangzhou, China, and Tom and Dick or Harry in Dusseldorf, among others. His work has been the subject of reviews and publications in Art News and The Rib, and Broyard lives and works in Canaan and Brooklyn, New York. So please help me welcome Henri to the stage.
Thank you, Anderson Ranch. Thank you guys all for coming. Let's see. Oh, wait. There we go. My name is Henri Paul Broyard. I'm a painter. Born and raised in Los Angeles, California. I've studied at California College of the Arts, painting and drawing. Studied with the Peter Doig class in Dusseldorf after that. And I've been living in New York for the past 8 years, the past 3 years of that in upstate New York. Here's round 2, striped shirt, looking great. Here's my house in upstate New York. I make paintings of interiors. I started making interior paintings during my undergrad time at CCA. Growing up in Los Angeles, I was in between my mom's house, my grandmother's house on either side, dad's side, mom's side, oscillating between these spaces. And over time, I kind of saw those spaces change as I saw the city change, as I moved from LA to the Bay Area, to New York, overseas, and realized that I was spending a lot of time in these sort of temporary transient spaces, a lot of apartments and things like that. And I started thinking about the history of spaces and what are the records kept of these spaces and what kind of marks do we leave behind. And for today's talk, it being a short 20-minute, I thought I would just sort of focus on my source imagery, which is also what my class here is based on. So I get a lot of inspiration from the urban environment. I've lived in urban environments forever. This photo, this dumpster, these bags next to the dumpster that are striped are absolutely gorgeous to me. Had to take this picture. All this ice on the landing is a hazard that needs to be melted. This motorhome was parked outside of my studio in East New York for about 2 years. Didn't move. I was preparing for this talk and looking through my photos, and I found 4 different photos I had taken of this. So it had to go in. It's just wild to me. This kind of, graffiti type mark making with spray paint, the wood grain in the windows, this sort of garbage bag in the other window. This whole thing is an object. It's my palette. It's brown. I love brown. Again, this obsession that I kind of have built with faux finishes and with outdoor finishes and different things hanging on things. This is in Catskill, New York, where I had a studio for a long time, and I always kind of viewed this little panel almost as a painting hanging on here or something kind of waiting for a mark. I have a history of graffiti. I did graffiti for a long time, so my eye is kind of trained for these types of things. Like, this is kind of inviting some kind of, mark making to happen. I didn't do it out of respect for the Catskill community. This is in Los Angeles on Pico Boulevard. This, again, painting, outdoor mural, the fact that it's doubled, spilling over onto the brick, that kind of like glitch, spilled over moment, that kind of interaction of paint with a urban surface, I really like. And this is kind of the bread and butter of my source imagery, is old photos. So I collect, these are probably the 1,200 or so photos that I brought here for my class. I invite everybody to come to the classroom and flip through them, take them if you want. It's a portion of my collection back in New York, and I source these from flea markets, from eBay. You can buy them in lots of 100 on eBay for $10, $12. It's kind of an interesting phenomenon that I'm interested in, where you're kind of buying someone's history. You're buying a record of someone's history. And as these older generations are sort of moving on, a lot of this is being, cast away. Every now and then I'll get really lucky on eBay and I'll be able to buy an entire photo album. A few years ago I got really lucky and I bought basically a box that was filled with photo albums, and flipping through it, the first one starts with like a christening of a child, and I'm following that all the way through. I set them up in chronological order, and it ended with that child growing up and being married. It was like her wedding album. And so that's a whole life lived in photo, and started in the 50s. And it was just really interesting to me that this is for sale, this is monetized. I'm able to buy this as a weirdo painter and flip through your memories and pull different things out and dissect it and paint on the photos and things like that. So I'll buy these in bulk. This is a file that I keep in my studio, so I'll split them up into categories. At the top here, you can see it says rooms right here. So that's like the ones that I know I'm gonna make I'm gonna make paintings from. So that's probably 5% of what's here. Out of those like 1,200, I think that I brought here, there's probably like 20 that I like. So in a way, it's like painting. There's a lot of swings before you get a hit, but that's what, kind of keeps you going. Here's a whole little album that I got, and some other family photos up top. This photo here actually was the source, and it might be in the thing later, was the source for this painting here. But yeah, we'll see more of that in a minute. These are some that I pulled out from the cake file. So all cakes. I tried to make a lot of cake paintings, and it's less interesting to paint, but I tried. So this is one of the main ways that I interact with the photos. I'll find a photo I like, and I'll begin to edit that photo down, to simplify that photo, to break the space down, remove the people, keep the space. I'm less interested in the people that inhabited that space. I'm more interested in, one, the fact that I am looking into this space as like a voyeur who has like paid money for this little object, and two, the geometry of the space, the geometry of these photos, also them being a preset geometry, a preset composition, a preset palette that I didn't have to do. I can now come in freely and just work and begin painting. So these are some of the painted photos. It's actually pretty interesting to see these this big, because these are probably 4 by 5 inches, 5 by 7 inches. They're really small, and this is acrylic on the actual photo. And sometimes there's a bit of collage. So this one I've taped off to sort of mask off a shape, make a composition. The chair in the bottom right-hand corner, at least the back of the chair, I cut, moved into the space to kind of get a better composition. And then this will be either projected onto a canvas of a sort of size that I feel like works for it, or I'll grid it out and do as tight of a drawing as I can. And eventually this will turn into a work like this. So this is the finished work from that previous photo. So there's a relationship to the source image. There's maybe some palette, some notes from the palette. There's a compositional relationship, but once I get that drawing down, the photo's usually out on my painting table or tacked on the wall besides the painting for a few days. I work on 4 or 5 paintings at a time, so it's kind of spastic in the studio. But that photo will eventually be taken down, put back into the file under like a painted photos file, and it just becomes about how am I making a successful painting? What does this composition call for in terms of a painting that talks about structure, line, form, palette, abstraction, everything? I feel like I am an abstract painter, cut up into these little pieces, put into these little boxes. I do work at times fully abstract, but I always go back to the interiors. The interiors are where I feel the most comfortable. So here's another source image, some people playing ColecoVision or Atari or something. And, you know, again, like just a quick sort of masking out of, you know, the information I don't want. I like the curtains, I like the bottom, I like this area to the left, the bed extending to the right, pretty boring, not sure what's gonna happen. It eventually becomes a painting like this. And it's, you know, the photo's never gonna fully show what the painting is in real life, but there's a lot of overpainting, there's a lot of erasure. I'm constantly in a battle between adding all day. At the end of the day, I look at it and I think, you killed it today. I knocked it out of the park. I come in the next day and I'm like, I can't open that tub of gesso quick enough. I need to just delete everything I did the previous day. So I end up with a lot of these, you know, large bands of color, and interacting with those in different ways, sort of pulling from that, you know, graffiti, that urban mark making background with these sort of ochre lines on the top, stripes of color to sort of like bring compositions down, get compositions a little tighter. This painting is also 36 by 48. The previous painting was 48 by 48. I painted a lot of standard sizes. That was a decision I made a few years ago, just so that wherever I am, I don't have to worry about stretching a painting that's 35 by 29. I can just go and get stretcher bars, get a canvas, and start working, because I like to just be working all the time. Here's another one. This one was originally going to be saved for, you know, an entire room. I had a plan for it to be an entire room. I drew this on a canvas that was 4 by 6 feet. It didn't work. I started painting it, didn't work. I eventually zeroed in on the elements I really liked, which was this sort of globe with these lines behind it and this sort of cutoff table and these things. And eventually it came out as this. So this painting's probably 20 inches by 20 inches. And again, a lot of erasure and sort of a total flattening of the space. That's what I'm interested in, sort of making this almost claustrophobic feel, or making this, having this juxtaposition between a deep, endless space, a sort of sphere that you might be able to reach behind or rotate, but then right above that, just a, you know, ignorant oval that's like, has nothing to do with anything. And then an oversized martini glass on the right. Here's another work. I do edit sometimes in Photoshop, so this one I had imported into my Photoshop. I was sort of editing it out. I masked lazily around the flowers in the original source image, and I liked the sort of shape that I had made with the lasso tool, and so I thought, you know, why can't I do that in the painting? It was also the first thing I painted on this panel after I had adjusted it was the flowers, and I immediately realized, well, that was a mistake. You have the entire rest of the painting to do. You just painted the like centerpiece of it, you know, like you're gonna make a mess. And so I just left all this space around it to sort of like preserve this like gentle kind of floral moment. Here's a classroom painting. A lot of spray paint, letting things happen like overspray, mirroring things with gradients, unpainted areas, letting you see through the back of a chair to the gray ground. Like erasing everything I had on the top with a thin gesso. I use they're all acrylic and water-based mediums, so that allows me to constantly overpaint, which then allows me to sort of enter in the studio almost a stream of consciousness kind of painting moment where the best days I'm not thinking, I'm just grabbing and working, and even if I know something's wrong in the moment, I know that I can delete it tomorrow. I know that I can take it out tomorrow, or I know that I can highlight it with something else the next day. This was, these are some digital collages. In 2021, I was invited by Nicotine magazine to do an editorial. They reached out to me and said, you can have 5 or 6 pages of the magazine. It was their issue that was coming out during Art Basel Miami Beach, so December 2021. And originally I was like, okay, cool, I'll just send you some high-res images of paintings. And then I thought, well, that seems like a waste. I'd rather make something specifically for it. So I went into my archive, scanned photos, and made these. This is a photo I took in my grandmother's bathroom that I superimposed this deer mural that I saw on and sort of edited out. Took out the Purell logo because, you know, no one wants to get sued. This one again, sort of things in my photo stream that I have that I'm interested in, and flipping through the photos that I take, sort of not thinking about it, just passing, oh, whoa, cool rock wall. Oh, cool brick wall with the chalkboard on it. Oh, cool brick wall with a weird, you know, tropical sort of painting of a bird on it, and like some piece of wood, half-painted piece of wood. Oh, there's a piece of wood in that one, piece of wood up there. Oh, wood frame, okay. Just, you know, put it all together and sort of make these connections. This was a photo that I came across in a larger album. I believe it was in that album, that christening album. And so this was a baby in this really opulent lace christening gown sitting in the corner of this absolutely gorgeous couch that I wish I had. Beautiful hanging basket, ceramic basket in the back. And I started drawing this on a panel, got too overwhelmed with the patterning. It turned into something else that it's just completely gone. And I always had that image in the back of my mind, so when it came time to this, I cut some pieces out, covered the baby's face, made it into just this sort of white lace abstraction, put it in the magazine. This is kind of 3 stages of a photo. So this is a photo of my brother growing up. I'm not sure how old he is here, 5, 7, something like that. 4, I'm bad with that. He could be just, this was him newborn. This is 2 days after he was born. And he matured very fast. And I loved this photo. This was the kitchen that I grew up in. TV table, microwave, TV, cable box, frame, this sort of line I became absolutely obsessed with. The cord I became obsessed with. The toy I became obsessed with as soon as I found this photo in my mom's storage. Hi, Mom, I think she's watching on live. And I edited this for Nicotine for the magazine into this. So replaced the tile, left some things, fixed some things, and then, so that's one finished work that exists in the digital world, which I don't know what that is. And then the final work became this. So this I had in a show in Catskill, New York at Forlan last year. So again, this sort of pushing this broken checkered floor, letting the floor kind of drop out, kind of flatten out, abstracting different elements. I'm not so interested in rendering things in realism. I'm more interested in the space in between realism and abstraction. I'm really interested in that the mural that was on the street where it bled over onto the bricks, where that's not a photorealistic mural. That's, that's somebody who knows how to paint, can paint pretty well. It's on the street, it's getting beat up, it's covered in dust, and it has this sort of veil over it, and it's got this sort of pedestrian, paint handling, if you will. So I like sort of existing in that space. I like showing things that are painted, showing accidents, things like that. Here's a small painting. This painting, I should have put in a photo of the back of it. I'm also obsessive with signing the backs of paintings and writing and drawing on the backs of paintings. This painting was finished 3 times, and I worked on in 5 different studios that I had over the course of 2018 to 2022, late 2022. This is the final iteration of it. I decided I can't touch it. I can't deal with it anymore. I can't touch it. So it's photographed, packed up. It exists. But you can see in the back sort of all this previous painting. So this history, and this talks to, in my mind, the history of an interior, the history of a space. Like we're currently on a ranch that was then on native land. What was here before us? What are the traces of that? Like what's this kind of archaeology that we can do just in the places around us? The history of, a beat up building, a beat up car, a mobile home that somebody wanted to remove logos on, so they just grabbed a can of brown paint and just went for it. Here's a smaller painting. Also, I'm checker and stripe obsessed. Here's another painting. This was from a book of I can't remember. It was from it was an image of a christening. So that's where this sort of basin comes in, and I knew I wanted to paint it. It was black and white. I started going into it. I made a few decisions to sort of touch the basin a little bit more, sort of push it in sort of a representational way, but then sort of knock it back at the same time, extend this candle ridiculously high, remove the flame, put the flame back in the background, more checkers, more brown. How quick can I paint a tabletop? Books. There's a small, this painting's 24 by 30 of a stool that I saw at a flea market, and sort of knew I had all these plans for the background. I was going to put the stool into another work. I decided to paint it on this panel, and again, was so excited to paint the stool that I realized I hadn't painted any kind of background, and this is just what the panel looks like. It stayed like this in the studio for a few months, and then I just realized it can't be touched. I can't touch it, so it exists like this. And then here's this was a painting from LA, a family studio that I have in LA, and sort of editing it down. I had this idea for like this almost camouflage army barracks kind of background to this, living for the past few years in the woods, away from things. I've kind of doubled down, tripled down on green and browns and yellows, and earth tones, and people told me in college, like, oh, no one likes yellow paintings, brown paintings. Well, that doesn't really matter to me. I still have to make them. And then adding in the geometry. Geometry is is something I do rely on to sort of guide the eye. And I like to give you little, hints, little samples of sort of a lamp that you might not notice immediately off the bat. But you do see it, a little pop of red and stuff like that. Thanks for coming to my talk.
Thank you, Henry. Our next speaker is Jenna Caravello. Woo! Yeah, we can clap. Jenna is a Los Angeles-based artist and assistant professor in the Department of Design and Media Arts at UCLA. She received her Bachelor of Fine Arts in Animation and Film Video Production from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago and holds an M.F.A. from the California Institute of the Arts in Experimental Animation. Caravello's she primarily works with VR, motion capture, animation, and video game platforms. Her single-channel and interactive works explore computer culture, video game logic, cartoon language, and the role of narrative in personal and digital memory. So welcome, Jenna.
Woo! First of all, just thank you so much for having me. I'm so in love with this space. I've never been here before, and I love being here. And man, thank you so much. Henry, your work is incredible. That was awesome. We actually have a lot in common. I think that painting of the flowers coming over that's on the block where I grew up. Yep. It is deep in my memory. Yeah, for 18 years, that thing. I love it. Cool. Well, shall we slideshow? Hi. My name is Jenna Caravello. I am an artist and an assistant professor at UCLA in the Department of Design Media Arts. That's what I look like. I am the associate director of the UCLA Game Lab, where we play and make and research games in an experimental art context. And this space is super inspiring to me, and the students who work in this space are incredible. And so I made a virtual version that you can hang out with me anytime you want. We can hang out in VR chat. But this is recent, so I want to go back a little bit. I was always an oil painter my entire life, and a constant theme for me really was, I think, is present in these more recent digital paintings, which is the idea of space and subject as being kind of equally important. And I really am interested in storytelling that explores viewership or participant agency, and I'll speak a lot more on that. Just some recent digital paintings, really like birds. And I went to SAIC, where I quickly abandoned oil painting and started working on animation. And Chicago was extremely vibrant for music and collaboration. So very soon after kind of moving there, I spent all of my time hanging out in DIY spaces with musicians and making music videos for a lot of Midwestern bands and New York bands, which was a really great way to kind of explore how I wanted my painterly past and my drawing past to come through in duration, right? And I do think that in all of my 2D animation, it's equally apparent that I'm really interested with the idea of spaces that you can explore And a lot of that comes from a prevalent interest and constant interest in video games, open world video games, which I will talk about as well. So as soon as I graduated from SAIC, I started working at a legendary documentary house called Kartemquin Films in Chicago, and I explored one of my other passions, which is tape media, and I was their digital media archivist for about 2-ish years. It was my job to sift through these horrible boxes and organize their tape media. And I was just really interested in what I could do with, yeah, Hoop Dreams is a fantastic film. I was really interested in what I could do with tape media and also digital media. And it really took me those 2 years archiving to realize that I just wanted to spend more time animating. So I convinced the good people at Kartemquin to hire me on a freelance basis to make animations for documentaries. And after a little while, I started making animations for documentaries all around Chicago. And then I began working on animations for commercials and websites and whatever project was coming my way. But I, on the side, I was making my own fine art, and I didn't really know how the two could coalesce, animation and working freelance. So I kind of wanted to get away from that, and I moved to Los Angeles. Incidentally, I worked on a documentary as soon as I moved to Los Angeles. The most recent documentary that I worked on was called Feels Good Man, directed by Arthur Jones. Familiar with Pepe the Frog, the meme? If you are not familiar, Pepe the Frog is actually a comic book character that comes from Matt Fury's comic Boys Club. I just love this headline when the film came out at Sundance. Angelina Jolie, Taylor Swift, and Pepe the Frog headline festival. I love it. But I really loved working on this documentary with these amazing people. I worked with one of my best friends, Kylan Woodrow, and we designed 2D animation for the sequence. Here's a 3D frog that I made that didn't end up in the film. He just needs his time to shine. But I can show you a clip from the introduction to the movie that Kylan and I animated, which is in the next slide. If I could have some volume, please. Cool. You get the idea. But okay, so let's talk about the real love of my life, which is video games. And unfortunately, it doesn't seem to want to play. Let's see if we can make it go. There it goes. So my entire life, I'd been really inspired by open world video games, and in particular, this moment in Tomb Raider 2, where as Lara Croft, you can run around in your own mansion, and there are no kind of enemies to defeat. There's nothing really to do except just be a polygonal lady in your polygonal mansion. And when I was a kid, my dad would play the video gamey parts where you were killing guys, and I would play the parts where you're diving into the pool. And this has always been in the back of my mind, especially, while I was working freelance, and I just couldn't wait to get back to my own films, and I couldn't wait to kind of expand on my own ideas about space being explorable and how important it is to have agency in space, even if you're watching a film, even if you're looking at an illustration or a painting. And this was just kind of a fixation fascination for me that really did become the spiritual seed for all of the work that I have been making recently. And it runs deep. It's very important to me. So let's talk about a recent 2D film that I made. Thinking, of course, about how spaces really do hold memory for me. I was moving from Chicago to Los Angeles and really fixated on how that journey, driving all the highways in between, just felt like these liminal kind of in-between spaces that were gathering and absorbing all of my kind of homesick sadness as I moved through the spaces. And it was also very familiar to me because I was born and raised in Los Angeles, so I was kind of coming home. And I was also making the journey with my father, who I love dearly and who also is really difficult to talk to about his job. He worked for a phone company called Packbell. And if ever you ask him what he does, he'd be like, "Oh, I work for the company. You know, yeah." It's just like, what did you do all day? So spending this time with my dad in these kind of liminal spaces that I felt were absorbing my feelings, I ended up making a film that really started with this image that I found driving that was going to embody kind of the mystery of what my dad does for a job in the space that was absorbing all of my sadness as I moved from Chicago to Los Angeles. So I first drew this character who is kind of me as a middle-aged lady wearing the uniform that my dad used to wear when he would go off doing his job. And she became this character who I used to draw kind of obsessively, and I named her Georgia after my favorite drummer in the band Yolo Tango. Deep cut, nobody knows that. And the film looks like this. It employs a lot of kind of death and first-person perspective when you begin the film that turns into third-person perspective, which really is embodies kind of how I see the transition in video games from an embodied first person to a kind of subjective third-person view. And this is also what it looks like. So I'll just keep talking instead of playing the whole thing for you. But this film kind of marked the end of making 2D films for me for a little while, because I realized how much I wanted to make video games. And so much of the motifs and the feelings and the perspectives in this short film are really just kind of a stopgap measure to making video games that you actually have agency in, that you can transition from first-person perspective to third-person perspective. And this is the moment where you have a transition, actually, so I'll just let it play. Third person, and now, from now on, this is our character, Georgia. And there's the space. Oh, look, it's a telephone. Yep, it's a digitally painted film. So after that film, I really focused on CG and trying to integrate my more painterly style with CG, which this music video that I made for Miranda Winters really kind of embodies. And I also started working in Unity, which is a video game software that allows you to use assets and play them back in real time and interact with them in real time. So some of this project was compiled actually in video game software. So I was very slowly kind of moving from animation into real-time media. There's a car. Do love cars. And then I made a music video for Jessica Risker called I See You Among the Stars, which was also in part compiled in Unity and entirely employed CG. So I spent most of my time working in CG from this point on. Really, really like wood paneling. But all of the kind of moments of her singing were video that was processed through a video synthesizer at CalArts, which I was really, really lucky to get access to. Very wacky. And another film which has a very dark contrast in the beginning called Wet House, which was almost entirely kind of compiled in Unity. But so I did a lot of thinking, while I was making these films and compiling them in video game software about what I really wanted to explore, and how I could bring my interest in embodiment, agency, and choice in a hard-coded narrative context to the projects that I wanted to make, to the experimental video games that I wanted to make. And it really starts with Zork, which, anyone familiar? Yeah, we got one. Zork, which is a fantastic text-based adventure game that allows you to kind of input what you want to do, where you want to go, what you want to look at, but you're just kind of looking at a black screen with green text, right? And you can actually play simulated versions of Zork still. But the idea of agency in a space that completely exists in your imagination is just so magical to me. And of course, Zork really borrows from the idea of choose your own adventure books, which I also really love and care a lot about. But then I was really inspired how choose your own adventure books and also Zork kind of were the ideas behind exploring narratives and having agency in narratives was explored through this film from 1967. Honestly, a pretty silly film. I don't know if it's worth a watch, but the way that this film would be presented to an audience is on two separate film reels, and the audience would kind of raise their flag based on what they wanted the main character to do. So there were all these choices to be made. This was in 1967. It's so cool. And depending on what the audience wanted, the projectionist would cover one of the reels, and then they would kind of play through and until there was another choice to be made, which I think is really wonderful. And I just love experiments in these realms. But this really did it for me. I don't know about you, but I spent a lot of time watching Let's Plays and gamers kind of exploring spaces in open world games. And there was a fan-run server that was running this game called Active Worlds. And a YouTuber whose name is Vinesauce managed to hack his way into this server and explore around this big, open, empty world that at one point had been filled with video game players, with real people walking around and talking to each other and building things in this world. And for the most part, it was a completely empty space until he came across this guy who was role-playing as if he was a part of the game, as if he was what we call a non-player character, an NPC. So this guy standing in this empty, open server, open world, closed server, open world video game, pretending that he was not a real person, was just so incredibly inspiring to me. And I really, this really solidified the idea of video game spaces as being inhabitable spaces to make art in and to role play in and to explore as an artist, right? So I started working on a project called Amber Row in 2019, which is an open world experience as you play as this little wax character who is actually a facsimile of a previous player in the game who is now dead and gone. And this game was about exploring my relationship with the death of my mother, who kind of left behind an entire echo of a life that I kind of come to inhabit in my own way. And in a lot of ways, I feel like her and I look like her. I'm like a wax cast of my mother. And so I made this open world that you actually play in VR. So it's a third-person VR game, and you control this character. And it also exists in first person as well. So you can see how Frontier Wisdom very much was a spiritual kind of successor to this guy. Where anytime that you gather something in the open world, if you find an object, you can bring it back to your inventory, which is a house that you are trapped inside of, and play in first person. And so you're constantly moving back and forth between first person and third person perspectives, gathering these objects, which when you return them to certain characters in the world, will thank you and then show you a memory in the form of a cutscene. And over time, as you gather objects, your own character starts distorting and losing her shape and kind of disassociating from the world. And also, as you continue to play, the space itself starts to distort, and the objects in the world start to distort as well. So the objects in the world, there are about 60 of them, and they're all kind of lovingly painted, and they're all connected to memories that I've had with my mother. And of course, once you've gathered every single object in the world and talked to every character in the world, at last you kind of compile a final memory that really is about the original player, my mother, who her entire message for you is just to get out of here and go experience something real. And this is the kind of project that is really hard for me to let go, because I still live it, I still feel it. And so it very much is my project that I continue to build on. I'm constantly redesigning the characters in it. I'm constantly redesigning the cutscenes, and I'm often remaking a lot of the objects as my memories change. I have to stop doing that. Don't do as I do. But this is very much a project that I've cared a lot about and that I've been working on for a really long time. Because I really love games and I think a lot about animation, the classes that I teach at UCLA and the place that I'm coming from when I'm making art come from some very specific thoughts. I really care about embodiment, agency, and choice in a hard-coded narrative context, as I had mentioned. But I also really like that in playing open-world video games, we're constantly looking for ways to amuse ourselves. The idea of emergent play kind of, yes, I could ride around on my horse in Red Dead Redemption and shoot a bunch of guys, but I could also try to flip this beer bottle into a hole for the next 4 hours. And that's what I mean by unique experiences and emergent play in open worlds. And you make your own memories in spaces like those. And so as an artist, you can set players up to have those emergent play opportunities. And I really care about that. And I think that that's really exciting. And then specifically in VR, I care a lot about challenging, there's a typo, challenging he assumption that spectacle or immersion is somehow guaranteed or the ultimate goal of VR. VR is a combination of software platform and hardware, and it has limitations and it has flaws. And I really love the idea of leaning into those limitations and flaws and being critical of VR as much more than some kind of technological spectacle. It's a tool. And I also really love to talk to people about VR frameworks, techniques, styles, and structures. We have done that with cinema for a really long time, made our own kind of value systems and talked about what we love about cinema and the limitations of the frame. But very rarely do people have these conversations about VR. And so if anyone ever wants to talk to me about that stuff, I'll never shut up. So even more recently, I've started making these very kind of short, brief, multi-channel interactive projects that live in galleries. And this one is called Canto 9, which draws from the idea of Dante's Inferno, where in Canto 9 of Inferno, that's the first time we encounter an angel. And the angel is really grumpy because he has to open a gate, and he's kind of a jerk, but he's also really half-baked conceptually. Later, Dante talks about angels and the glory of God and all that. But as a Jew, I find it really interesting. But I wanted to explore this idea of the half-baked angel as an avatar for God, but also as an avatar for me. And avatars, of course, in video games are that's what we play as. We play as avatars. And so what this is 3 different ways to interact with these kind of half-baked angel characters. In this channel, you can type things to this angel, and if you say negative things, he will start to lose his form, lose his shape. If you say nice things to him, he'll start to kind of build himself back up. But if you give him too confusing of a message, he will terribly tangle himself inside of himself. And baked into each one of the channels of Canto 9 is a way to kind of destroy and break the game. And this is really all it is. In Canto 9 Battle, you play as both these angel action figure characters who are forever bashing each other and hitting each other in the face. You can kind of change your perspective from first-person perspective of the angel that we are embodying right now to kind of a third-person perspective of both angels, like this, where you're locked to one of them. And with your keyboard, you're able to kind of swing their arms around. And I really love this as a proxy for video gaming, especially during COVID, where I found myself playing video games with strangers online and thinking about how intimate and like oddly homoerotic it is to smash some characters together on a table. But really how intimate it is to have like the voice of another gamer just kind of whispering in your ear when you haven't seen anyone for 2 years. And that's where this one comes from. And then this last channel of Canto 9 is called Apartment, which is it's a to the inch recreation of my apartment in Echo Park, Los Angeles. And you can control this ragdoll angel character just kind of smashing against the walls. And if you go too fast or if you explore too much, you can get horribly embedded in the walls. And this is how it feels. And I was really excited when last summer some screen capture from Canto 9 Apartment was played at Demo Fest in Amsterdam. That was really fun. I also experiment a lot with motion capture and different ways to integrate interactivity, motion capture VR into just my animation making process. So these are just some examples of that. And I've been working on a project. Well, I guess I finished it, but I'm always working on my projects. I finished a project called Go Slow in 2022, which is my head floating in some black goo, and it uses a Microsoft Kinect, which can track your body movements. And if you move too quickly towards my head, she will start making some terrible faces and will kind of hide underneath the water. And if you start moving very slowly, she will start kind of picking up a little bit, and she will come out of the water and be happy again. And this is kind of what it looks like. And really it is just how I felt about coming out of COVID. Don't come too fast at me, please. And then this last project, which I actually don't have anything to show you of except for here's my team, is a project that I'm so excited about that actually uses motion capture and VR as a tool for me to interface directly with my friend Celia Hollander's Ableton project live in front of an audience. So it really is a musical piece that allows for direct collaboration where spaces are, virtual spaces are filled with objects that are then mapped to spatial X, Y, and Z values that change the effects or the pitch or what have you of Celia's Ableton project live. And that's John Brumley on the left, who is an amazing programmer who's been helping on the project, and Henrik Soderstrom, who is a grad student researcher who is working on the project. And if I can have some volume, this is just like what it looks like when we're playing around in my studio.
They're all mapped to different pitches, but okay.
It's a project coming soon. It's called Love Like, and we have kind of a version 1 show happening on August 18th in Los Angeles at 2220 Arts. Anyway, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Hello. Hello, hello. Thank you so much, Henry and Jenna. We do have time for a few questions. If anyone has any, just raise your hand. We have a mic runner. They will come to you, and I'm going to give this to our 2 speakers. You guys can shoot. Nice. Jenna, how do we access your work? How do we get to the games that you have out in the world? Where do we find them? How do we get to play them?
Yeah, the question was how to access the games. They exist as gallery pieces, so they're usually in spaces. So when I have a show, that's where they'll be. Yeah, I don't put them online on itch.io, which is a platform for playing indie games or anything like that, which would be awesome, but I don't. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, cool. Thank you. I think the question goes for both. It's more of a comment. Hopefully, it'll permeate as a question. But it seems I keep thinking about the notions of electronic music, hip hop, and things of that are based on sampling. Both of you guys, in terms of open world games and congregating in a space where it's more of a transitory kind of idea, much in the same way that 10 seconds of a James Brown beat can become a song, can become a phenomena, can change the world. And as well as in taking photographs that are not coming from your own family, but also taking out parts, especially people, and then leaving, let's say, the interior or objects within the interior that much sound like a song without a person singing, but just the background, the noise or the sounds that are being played for the singer to sing upon. Can you talk about that? Is that something that you find prominent in the way that the both of you are working? Maybe not completely bound in the notion of sampling, but taking something that's viewed as transitory and making it an entire world on those 10 seconds.
Yeah.
Does that make sense, hopefully, yeah?
Yeah, definitely. I think I could definitely look at my work through the lens of sampling or through the lens of a finished beat or an exhibition, even as a finished album. And sampling things from source images, sampling, let's say, a composition from one source image, sampling, let's say, a palette from a second source image, and then sampling just things from down inside of me that will just come out sort of, back of brain, like not thinking about it painting. I definitely think that applies to my work for sure. And I enjoy that the most. That's kind of what I get the most joy out of, or the best days in the studio are when I'll hit a spot, I'll flip through some of my photos, or I'll flip through photos on my phone or something like that, or I'll just look outside and think oh wow, the way that color of the grass oscillates from this end to that end, what if I tried that in a painting, and then I'm painting an entire painting green again, so it's that kind of openness to have a work change on a dime and not be sort of tied to any one thing, and letting different sources come in.
Yeah, I love the idea of sampling as being a good metaphor for what we both do, because I definitely sample from a list of symbols and memories, and then that kind of becomes my fixation for any one piece. And I hope to do that within my own work, to give someone the agency to find something that they want to fixate on. Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
I guess this is another question for both of you. I feel like there's a very prominent like third party that's constantly like present in your works or like in the process of making your works, whether it be like a third party like coming into your extremely private, intimate world, or like you entering into someone else's like moments of privacy. And I was wondering, like, I don't know, like, how does that feel sometimes gratifying? Does that feel really like offensive sometimes for yourself? Or like, yeah, like how does it make you feel? Like, do you feel in your element, or does it push you to be uncomfortable?
Yeah, I kind of have a question for you based on that one, which is, yeah, just to echo, what she was saying is like, how do you feel about the audience as they stand in front of your work? Like, what kind of agency do you like them to have in your space?
I think the audience, I think the audience almost they finish my paintings for me. Taking out figures when you see, like, let's say a Kerry James Marshall painting and there's a figure front and center and a gorgeous interior behind that figure, you immediately are, okay, it's this figure space. I'm staying at a distance. I want to know the story about that figure. When you remove that figure, when you're just painting a space, we all are familiar with spaces to a certain extent. You think, well, how would I operate in that space? Well, I can't stand in it because the floor is falling out. I can't grab that because it doesn't exist. And so I like for the viewer to finish the paintings in that kind of way. Sometimes it's subconscious, sometimes it's really on the surface. And two, there is an absolute, like I said, like voyeuristic quality to it. I am a very, open public person. My Instagram is public. Like, I talk on the phone to scammers and try and get them to hang up with me, and it's just like, I think that the world is a game to a certain extent, and yeah, it's interesting, and I just like investigating that weirdness, almost that creepiness of me, yes, going into these spaces, of me looking at a photo of a baby taken after their christening on this couch. Like, I am stunned all the time of, why do I own that photo? Why do I have that photo? Who's letting that photo go? I've tried to get photos like that from members of my family, and they're like, well, what, you want me to mail you a photo album? What are you doing with it? Well, I'm scanning it and I'm gonna make paintings from it. I'm not comfortable with that, Henry. I'll see you next time you're in LA. All right, goodbye. And then I'm back on eBay and I'm family heirlooms for low cost family heirloom photos. And yeah, so there is that sort of element, yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I similarly have like a creepy interest in other people. I think I wanted really badly to make people feel similarly with my still work, and then I got even more selfish, and I wanted to keep people in a theater in a dark room staring at my thing for a duration of time. I love the idea of a captive audience, and then further putting the headset thing on their face. Now they're really in it. now they really have to deal with my messed up gravity and there's no escape. Yeah. My symbology. Which is not to say that I really believe that people like forget who they are when they're in VR. They take who they are with them. They remember they still have to pick up their kids. They're hungry. You don't forget who you are just because you have the thing on your head. It's just one more thing that you have to now deal with, and it's my thing that you have to deal with now. And there's something very, very selfish and creepy about that when it comes to making VR works for me, and I fully understand that. I fully own it. Welcome to my gravity.
So this one's from my friend Austin, who's watching the live stream.
Hi,
he
Austin.
Just texted me.
How you doing?
He said, this is for Jenna. He said, "It's interesting that so much of your practice is creating a space that involves you in a different realm. How does your physical self influence these virtual worlds you create, if they do? And do you treat all online spaces as a game, i.e. social media? How does it make you feel that people are playing in a game oh my God, I cannot talk when I have a mic. How does it make you feel that people are playing a game in these personal spaces you create?"
Yeah, that's such an interesting question because I very much am inspired by physicality and the limitations of both physicality and interacting both with a virtual space and with virtual people, with people virtually. There are all kinds of limitations, right? Physical limitations. You can't touch someone who is your best friend online. You can't shake their hand. And I think a lot about kind of mediating the limitations of VR through the limitations of my body. I cannot fly. And if I were to make you fly in VR, I would expect you to be sick and uncomfortable. I wouldn't expect you to be super like excited and for it to be like a seamless experience, you know? And so that's what embodiment virtually means to me is to, in kind of a unfair or skewing kind of way to force your physicality into an uncomfortable space with VR. Yeah, I might be a transhumanist. Like I would like to maybe download my consciousness into a robot. And I think a lot about that when interfacing with people online, is that we're all just kind of consciousness floating in internet soup. And I value that, and I think that's beautiful. I've had a lot of friendships with people who are homebound or who were grievously wounded and spent a lot of time in VR trying to make friends and kind of live out their dreams of becoming comedians in VR spaces. And I think that there's something both like wonderfully physical and human and also just like wonderfully ridiculous about all of that. And it's all wonderful. I hope that answers the question. Yeah.
Thank you both so much. I encourage everyone to go check out their studios, see what their students are making, what they're up to, catch them on campus in the cafe. But again, thank you so much. We appreciate you guys speaking. Thanks, everyone.